welcome to the 30th anniversary of the New York JavaSIG. It's been hard to believe it's been 30 years. I know that the 25th anniversary, that was the time I was going to step away and let somebody take over, but COVID came in, so I decided to hang out for a few more years. So first of all, let me thank TerraSky for hosting us. Thank you, TerraSky. And before we get started, here's Gabri to talk about TerraSky.
Thank you all. Really, I am pleased to welcome you in our space on behalf of TerraSky. And I'm here, I'm Maria Gabriella Brodi, I'm a solution architect. There are a few from our team. We have Rania, the regional director for sales, then Ilya, that is account executive, and Joel, that goes around, that is our office manager, and a few from the engineering team, like exactly, where are all of the other guys? Okay, so Mandeep is there, but there are more that are over here. So quickly, for those that are curious about why TerraSky, what we do, we are a global solution integrator. So we work with a number of products, and as you can see, we have partnership with many, with the bigger cloud, but not only. We work with VMware, HashiCorp, and many more companies that didn't make the slide for now. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that we are also a member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. We are really active in the community and contribute to a good number of projects for the open source. The space that we work in, well, of course, AI, everybody looks like needs to do AI at this time, but there is more from hardware virtualization, Kubernetes serverless, everything that is going to be the landing zone for your workload, as well as cloud, as we were saying, data, because no application is working in a vacuum. A lot around platform engineering, so helping companies and teams to modernize their pipeline and everything around the best practices for developer experience and digital workspace. Now, specifically for today, we were thinking, let's talk a moment for generative AI. Any of you is already working in building agent or using MCP? We have a few already. Nice. We do work in this space. The way we approach it is through workshop, where we try to bring everyone that kind of a domain-driven development. Like, let's understand, let's be on the same page of what we need to do, what's the right application, which are the requirements, and where it's going to land. If it is in Amazon, if it is in your GPU, in the data center that you have in your GPU, then we codify all of these things in blueprints that describe the security concern, compliance, and all of machine learning operation. That's the new buzzword. And finally, we go to actually doing the deployment, like the delivery of what we discussed, and so on with our customer. And security, of course, is part of the deal, like compliance, but also cost control, because as you know, when you start using Gen AI, mainly in the cloud, it can go up the cost really, really fast. And because today we are talking about a new version of Java and the space is moving so quickly, one of the tools that we have in our portfolio is Spring Application Advisor. Maybe some of, I see that you were nodding. You know Spring Application Advisor, maybe? Yeah. So, it's a tool that will help you maintain your code up to date with the new release. And the way it does is through using Open Rewrite. So the idea is that at each check-in, it's going to look in your POM file or in your build Gradle and see what is the next minimal update that you should do in order to use the latest and greatest of the library. Then, of course, it creates a pull request, so you're going to approve it, and it will go through CI/CD as usual, so that you have an opportunity over there to really fix if something doesn't work at that very moment. Because I guess it's, we all know when we change from version A to version X, we end up with something that we don't know what to do with it. So that is all from our side, and thank you for being here. Looking forward to what's next.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabri, and thank you, Terra Sky, and also thank you to Diff Blue for the pizza. Pizza is expensive. Okay. So before I give my talk on intro to agents, I wanted to talk about a little initiative that we put together that one of our leaders, Nahad, had come up with, a mentorship program. So I guess, Jeanne, was this back in July we started this, or June?
We started our first meetings in July, so we had it conceived a bit earlier.
Do you want to describe it?
Sure. All right. Anyone who works for a company knows that the way you get stuff done is you find someone who's passionate about something and they make things happen. So Neha floated to us right before the summer that it would be nice if we tried doing a mentoring program in the Java user group. And we talked about, what problems we thought it might solve, and we were like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we announced at either the May or June Java user group that we were doing this, and also posted on social media and our mailing list. And we had 4 people who signed up to be in our initial batch of mentees. One of them asked, well, what's the goal? And it's we're kind of figuring this out as we go, so it's whatever you want it to be. And each of our mentees had different goals, and they all got one-on-one experience. I met with my mentee 4 times. I think you met 5. And it was really nice because you had that one-on-one time to build on what someone was trying to solve. And it could be you wanted to present, or you wanted to know how to pitch ideas at your company, or you wanted to learn how to do AI or how to get a job, and we were able to customize it. So we're hoping to do this again in the future. If you're interested in either being a mentor or a mentee, let one of us know, and we will see when we want to run it again.
Thanks, Jeanne. It was really interesting. We expected questions from our mentees about Java and technical things. While we did talk about that, and we talked about doing Gen AI, things like that, it was more or less dealing with your manager, how to deal with your manager, how to deal with politics, how to go ahead, how do I make time for my career. So it was interesting that that was primarily the discussion rather than the bits and bytes aspect of your career. Anyway, let's go over to agents. Unless somebody has any open questions about anything before I start.
Oh, we have to announce Java 25 came out. You can announce it. You're holding the mic.
So was it the 16th? Java?
Yeah.
The 16th. So Java 25 formally released long-term support, right, on the 16th of this month. So what version, so who's using anything below Java 11? 11 or below? Okay, how about 17 or below? Who's above 17? Oh, that's good. That's really good. Because usually you only get a few hands. Anybody using Java 20 from 20 on in production? Okay. Nice. Let me get rid of PowerPoint for a second. And before I get started, since I only have a short, this is a Thunder Talk, not a lightning talk, but a Thunder Talk, so it goes a little bit slower. Okay, slideshow. I apologize for walking in front of the screen here. So let me find out first, who has not done any work with AI? Okay, that's a few. Anybody doing work with agents? Only a few. That's good. So I'm glad. because even though there's a lot of talk about AI and agents and like it's going to take over our jobs, it's going to take over the world, AGI is going to kill us all. So, and that's all like YouTube monetization algorithm. Yeah, please watch me, please watch me. So what I want to do, and you see in some of my courses, I want to take a more gentler approach to teaching this stuff, because you really have to understand the foundations of AI before you proceed. Like before we started, we had a nice discussion about prompts and how important prompts are. Actually, the word is context to a language model. So you have to really understand the foundations before you go ahead, right? It's just like if you're doing e-commerce and you have a library to do e-commerce, you better know about e-commerce. If you work in healthcare and you have a library for healthcare, you better understand healthcare. If you're doing AI and you have a library doing AI, you better understand AI. It's not like Spring Boot. It's not like Quarkus. You plug in and expect everything to work. It's different. It's way different. Okay. So I wanted to go over agents, introduction agent. This is not a full like, what are MCP servers and what's A to A protocol. That's like next steps. Let's start off from the beginning. Okay. So we know language models are really good at patterns, right? We know that a chatbot is not in a language model. A chatbot uses a language model or a collection of language models, right? But they're really good at patterns. That's really cool. And a lot of basic models that you get from OpenAI and from Google, Gemini, and from Anthropic, all these big companies, they're trained on code patterns, right? They're trained on Java, they're trained on Python, they're trained on different code patterns. So for example, and I'll show this working for real. So let's say I'm using ChatGPT, which is a web app, right? ChatGPT is a web app that talks to language models. It's not a language model, it talks to language models. And if I say I have 3 methods, get weather with some coordinates, get flight information, buy fishing gear, which method should I use to find a warm place for a winter vacation? So foundation models are good at patterns, right? Just like humans hopefully are good at patterns. This is, AI is telling us stuff about ourselves, that patterns drive everything. But it uses good software engineering techniques like get weather. What do you think that does? Gets the weather, right? Get flight info. Probably gets some flight information from, from my United Airlines flight is delayed or something like that, which is often the case. Buy fishing gear, we know what that does. So using good software engineering techniques and a good prompt that I give it and good naming, it actually gave me a good answer. And why did it give me a good answer? Because I helped it, right? I used good software engineering techniques to name my methods, to put the right, a good name for the parameters I'm passing. So I helped the machine. It didn't know this, but if I said I have 3 methods, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and N, it would not know. It's looking at patterns. That's the critical thing. Now, that was not what's called a reasoning model. Now, so a reasoning model in the old days, like 3 years ago, so there were models that simply completed, like roses are red, violets are, right? They completed tokens. It's a little more sophisticated now. Now they've been like fine-tuned several times. So if you use an old-fashioned model, which you still can use if you go to ChatGPT, and I think 04 is not a reasoning model. It doesn't understand examples. You have to give it examples. Now, why? Because you're giving it patterns. You're giving it additional patterns to follow. So, but I'm giving it information. If I use a reasoning model, oops, sorry about that. If I use a reasoning model, now what's a reasoning model? A reasoning model is a model that uses patterns, examples, to reason a good answer. Now, if you're not using a reasoning model, you have to give it examples. Like I went to the store, I bought 3 oranges, and then I gave 2 to my sister, and then I bought another one. So you're giving it patterns, and you say like, okay, and here's another problem similar to that one. Please solve it in similar pattern. That's a non-reasoning model. A reasoning model already knows that. So if you use a reasoning model, like right now it's 5, ChatGPT, I think it's 05. So that's already a reasoning model. You don't have to give it examples. So your prompt does not have to give it examples. This is important if you're in a production environment. One model may want examples, one model may not. You have to track that. You have to monitor that. But a reasoning model is actually really good. It's even actually better than a non-reasoning model. And it gave me like this nice little table and inferred all this information from the same prompt, right? That's pretty cool. So it's really good at patterns as long as I'm a good software engineer, right? That's a key point, right? So reasoning models are really good. They're recursive. They can solve a problem recursively. Like, okay, to solve this problem, these are subproblems. You got to solve those subproblems. Maybe break it down again. So they're really good at that. Okay, yeah, we know that. Okay, so for example, I give some complicated problem to a reasoning model, and the reasoning model says, hey, step one, you better search the web for something, right? Because LLMs, they're not search engines. Right? So if you ever notice like an older person using ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic, they use it like a search engine. It's not a search engine. It might use a search engine in the back end, but it's not a search engine. So it says, well, to solve the first problem, you have to search the web. You might have to do a database lookup. You might have to calculate something because I'm really crappy at calculation. I mean, LLMs are really bad at doing arithmetic, right? They know strings, right? And then, oh, you have to do this REST call, that other REST call, and then you have to combine everything. So it told me, hey, those are the steps. That's cool. But it can't perform those steps. Right? It cannot perform a step. It just tells you. Here's a text, or may speak it to you. Right? So it would be nice if it could do those steps for me. So about a year and a half ago, maybe a little slightly longer than that, so OpenAI came up with this concept called function calling. Because they're mostly Python, and they call it function calling. And it's now called tools. And for us Java developers, it's really method calling. But you might hear tools. Okay, so what is that? So tools, most major language models, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Mistral, all the big ones, they all handle function calling. Again, this is for a language model to call methods in your code. They don't all do this, right? But the big ones do. And some are better than others. And it's controlled by your system and user message. So user message is what you typically send to a language model. A system message, anyone know what a system message is? It's an instruction, right? It's an instruction, how to behave, right? Behave like you're teaching high school students, or respond like you're a professional Java consultant, right? Instructions. So language models, they express the intent to call a method, but they don't call it. They express the intent. They don't call it because it could be quite dangerous if it did that, right? So they express the intent. So if that's what a language model does, our friends over at LangChain4j, which is a Java library to handle generative AI. How many people have heard of LangChain4j? It's really, really popular. It's very, very easy to use. And they're improving it almost like on a weekly basis. I finished a course with version 1.3. 2 weeks later, it was 1.4. And I thought I finished it, and then 2 weeks later, it was 1.5. So it's moving quite rapidly. So they have two levels. They followed the low-level language model. It's like, okay, so let me know which methods I should call. And it gives you the option if you want to call it or not, which is good for safety purposes. You don't want a language model doing something on your behalf without any safety checks, because it could hallucinate. Hallucinate just means that it can give you a bad answer. So it's a model. What's a weather model? A weather model, does it predict the weather 100%? No, of course not. Does a financial model predict your portfolio perfectly? No. Does a language model give you a perfect answer? No. That's what a model is. So that's from the low level. But it also gives you a high level. So LangChain also gives you a high level, like, you know what? Most people want to call code. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to just give me the method, and I will call it for you. So it gives you two mechanisms. So the second one is that it's extremely easy. I'll show you. It's like less than a page of code to do this. The high level, the low level, it's a little more complicated, but if you're in a big enterprise and you have to hook in a security system or access control system or something more sophisticated, then you probably have to use a low level. Like, is Frank allowed to use that method? Right, there has to be some sort of apple in there. So this allows a language model to call methods in your code. Okay, so I'll go quickly through this, and hopefully IntelliJ will behave, and I'll show you running. So here's an example. Here's my flight status. I have this class called flight info, and I annotate this method. I say this is a tool. In other words, this is a method I want you to call. Remember, tool means method call. And it's get flight status, and there's my parameter. And notice that I'm using a useful name, the flight ID, and I'm also giving it this description. What do you think that description is doing? Yeah, exactly. This is helping the language model. Remember, language model, giving me information so I could infer patterns. So it's giving information to the language model. This is giving information to the language model. This is giving information to the language model. The same thing with this guy and that guy. And now I'm hard coding something. Now obviously, for real, you'd have like a REST call here and a REST call here. So I just hard coded something in there so I can fit in a page of code. And then to create a chatbot in LangChain4j, that's how easy it is. It's really simple. And a chatbot meaning that I can talk to the language model and maintain context. In other words, remember what I said 2 minutes ago. And here's the main program. It's like, this is how trivially easy it is. So in LangChain4j, so what model do I want to use? Here I'm using OpenAI. I could have said like use the Google Gemini model, or use the Mistrals, or use this one. There's like dozens of these to use. But once I do that, everything else is LangChain4j. This is the only time I'm talking about a specific language model. Everything down here is just pure abstraction, right? LangChain4j. So I create a chatbot, and as I said, this is how easy it is. I'm going to create a chatbot with using an OpenAI model. Here, these are the methods, the so-called tools. And I said, well, remember the last 10 messages so you can remember my name and what I was talking about. That's it. That's the chatbot. Then I call, that's the method, flight info. I need the status of that, and what type of aircraft, and cost. Okay, so, hello. Does anybody know the shortcut for presentation mode for? So
Tilde, and after that select zoom. It's better than presentation mode, otherwise it will close your controls. Command tilde.
Yes, does seem to work.
No?
No.
View, zoom.
Hold on, I think this is the this is the.
Maybe the UI is broken because it's showing on a different screen.
Yeah. Okay. I could do this. How about that? Okay. So there's the OpenAI. So once I have that, I'm now in LangChain4j land. There's my system message. In other words, behavior like a helpful flight agent. And here's the tools that I'm using. Right. So this is what I showed in code before. What? Oh, that's lovely. My license is going to expire in 4 days.
You need a license?
Meetings. It's very good.
Yeah. Okay. Come on. My mouse is not even working now. Okay. Okay, my mouse is hosed. Anyway, if we were to run this, all right, let's forget that. I'll give you the repo. You could run it yourself. All right. So the point about the method names is that, you know, be a good software engineer, like use really good names, make sure the description is clear, that the parameters, you know, and the good test is like, tell your colleague, would you be able to use my code if I gave you these methods? Would you be able to tell? And if that person said, well, probably, the language model probably could do that too, right? And the language model is making a best guess, right? It's not so smart. It understands patterns. So give it guidance. And when you use tools, you keep it less than 20 tools. It doesn't understand if you, like, forget about 100 tools. Forget about 50 tools. 10 tools. Keep things small. What else is important here? Tools are part of your context window, right? So language models only understand what you said in the context window. They don't understand anything else but what's in the context window. That's it. That's all they understand. So make sure it fits in the context window, because language models have restrictions on how big the context window is. Okay. So what does this have to do with agents? So why did I talk about tools? Well, first of all, to talk about agents, agents have been around for a long, long time. I mean, long time. I mean, I had an agent startup during .com. That's like 20 years, over 20 years ago. So it's not a new concept, right? But when people talk about agents today, they typically mean this paper, Anthropic's paper on building effective agents. That there's a URL down there. So based upon that paper, which is based upon the general idea of an agent, but it talks about agentic systems, because everybody likes to say, I work in agentic systems. It sounds pretty cool, like, but what is that? So make sure when someone says the word agent, ask them, what exactly do you mean by agent? Because everybody has their own definition of agent. There's no standard term, definition of agent. So that's really important. So an agent is basically, we know what a tool is. I just went over what a tool is. It's function call, method calling. So it's a system that uses those methods, and it uses some sort of orchestration. So either a human defines the orchestration, like pull that one, then pull this one, pull that one, pull this one. So a human defined it, or a language model said, like, you know what, I think it's best if we did this. So it's either a human defined it, defined a workflow, or a language model defined a workflow. Right, so it looks like this. So we have this service I talked about. This is the tool, the tool set of tools. Here's a language model. That's what we call a service. An agent is like, it understands that we're finding out the status of a flight, or we're planning out a vacation, or some task. So that's what an agent does. And the workflow, as I said, either a human defined the workflow, or language models define a workflow. And the one thing about agents is that, well, if we have all these tools, right, that are working together, they might want to share information. So there's shared context. So there's shared data. Context is just data. Shared context amongst all the agents. So an agent is something that either a human defines a workflow, or a language model defines a workflow, or a collection of language models defines the workflow with a shared context. So that's how you pass information back and forth. So I'm trying to go as fast to get Jeanne in here. So when you deal with agents, and maybe I'll have a follow-up, we'll talk specifically, and by then I'll have a new laptop. So be careful. Agents have multiple definitions. When someone says agent, what do you mean by agent? So that's the first thing. What's important here? This is another one. Costs or language models are bounded, right? When you use a language model, you know what the costs are, right? It's how many tokens you send over the wire. That's how much your management has to pay, or you have to pay, right? Agents costs are unbounded. So if you're asking your manager, like, oh, I'd like to like do some work or some production system with agents. You know, what's it going to cost? Oh, it's unbounded. It's not going to work, right? So you got to be really careful. Because agents, a language model could define a workflow of saying like, go over here and then go over here and go over here and do this again and again and again and again, and then you're spending money. It's unbounded. So as we move forward in time, there's going to be systems that protect us from that, but right now, it's unbounded. It's very dangerous. And other than that, there's these other things you have to worry about agents. So it's not something that like, oh, it's a really cool framework. It's been tested. There's best practices. There are no best practices with generative AI right now. There are just practices. Right? It's too early. And hope they still mess up, right? Still hallucinate because they're based upon a random number generator, right? And it says like 70% of the time you're going to be right, 30% of the time you're going to be wrong. So 30% of the time you're going to hallucinate. And what happens if you have collections of agents that do that? Wow, it could be a problem. So these are things that as developers we have to watch and monitor and manage, right? In language models, and they drift over time, right? They change over time. So all kinds of stuff you have to worry about. So don't assume like you can plug into a framework and all is like rosy and everything's work fine. Okay, so and also to be useful, you would think that agents from one company should work with another company. Well, there are all these standards. It's still very early. People are working through this because there's a lot of potential. There's huge potential. But there are so many standards. And not all of them work together. So these are things that you have to ask, like, what are you using? What should we, there's a lot of choices to make. So I'm going to stop here. Maybe my next talk, I'll go into more detail and have a working laptop where I can show you the code. So I'll send out the repo so you can try it yourself. It's really. So any questions? Yes.
When a chat model or LangChain for J is talking to a tool or inspecting the tool to see what it can do, is it reading the bytecode, the source code, both? Or if it's reading the source code, is it also reading the Java doc comments?
So a language model only understands text.
Okay.
It only understands text. So models that are trained on code, like some models like Claude, like Anthropic's Claude is very good at code. They fed it all these patterns on code, so it understands code text patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you ask it questions, it bases your question on what it understands as patterns.
So that's the full source code, including the doc comments, and that's what it uses to tell what the tool can do.
Right. So it's also up to you. It's also up to you to give proper context.
Right. Question about tool, how the LangChain uses tool and what extra information will be sent to model. The annotation. That's the question.
From a privacy point of view or from a technical point of view?
From a technical point of view, I mean, if I put doc comments in saying, get flight info
okay.
method does, yada, yada.
I understand what you're saying. Okay, yes. So tools are sent in the system message. When you talk to a language model, all the information about your tool, about your methods, are sent in the system message, along with the prompt. So this whole thing goes over to a language model like that. That's how it understands the tools.
And what is it sending? Is it sending something that's inferred by reading the annotations and the bytecode?
So for each language model, unfortunately, each language model does its own thing. There's a different REST API for each one.
Okay.
So how it fits, the people at LangChain for J, thankfully, have abstracted that for us. But if you look at the low level, if you look at what goes over the wire, each thing is different. Each REST API is different from each language model.
When you run your application, a tool annotation will be parsed by LangChain for J and prepare this REST call to your model. That's what was trying to say.
Right.
In addition to the signature.
Yeah, it's not reading bytecode, it's just a regular annotation.
It's just text.
Capability from the LangChain perspective, and after that, LangChain turned into text that will be sent.
Okay, but before it sends the text, it's getting that text that it sends.
Yeah, it's a simple annotation.
Not from the doc comments, not from the source code of the tool class.
It's an runtime. So the LangChain for J have an annotation processor that will parses your code, that will be executed, extracted the add tool annotation, and prepares the tool specification application that will be sent together with system.
Okay.
Your length chain application is something that will be calling this tool. It's not model will be calling this tool.
Okay.
Because as Frank mentioned, the model has reply where it describes intent. And the framework understood, because there's a structure, response, specification, something like that, they know where to read in the response.
Okay.
And after that, it will call local tool
Right.
get weather, and after that, the response will be sent back to the model. Model will make some adjustments, will make some decision, and send you back with the response. Something like this, you don't need to do it yourself, because LangChain4j already handled all this conversation. So for you, it sounds like, oh, model calls my tool,
Right.
which in reality, LangChain4j calls your tool.
There's a whole text protocol that goes back
Yes,
and
exactly.
forth. Yeah.
There's a little back and forth that is hidden from you as a developer, and is handled by framework. Same thing that Spring AI and LangChain4j do, like very similar things.
Yeah, so that part is deterministic. The
Yes.
results
Yeah.
coming back
Results
are not
And model
deterministic.
can decide not to call the tool at all.
And it can call a made up method.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So all these agents, they don't interact with each other, they cannot talk to each other, they cannot.
Well, they're trying to all make friends now. So I think there were two of them have made friends, and they're combined. I think A to A and something else. They combined into their own protocol, a new one. So this is all evolving. This is all evolving. You know, would I put something like this into production right away? There's a lot of testing to do with this stuff. There's a lot of stuff you have to do when you do generative AI. There's monitoring, management. You have to monitor prompts. You have to monitor versions of your models. There's a RAG system you have to monitor. It's a lot more infrastructure to worry about. But it's very useful. Very.
And it's computation intensive, does it take a lot?
Well, it deals with strings, right? So machines are slow with strings. Latency is very high. I mean, at this point, we're probably not going to do it for low latency applications. Maybe in the future it might, but not yet. I mean, latency is in seconds. Anyway, let me turn everything over to Jeanne. So thank you, everybody.
I want to note that there's cookies, they're really good. So feel free to get up while I'm talking to you at a cookie. All right, welcome to Java Does What Now, the Java 25 edition. This talk started as a Java 21 talk, and Frank's like, can it be about Java 25? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Given that Java 25 came out literally last week, I've labeled everything in this presentation that's 25 with the exception of one thing that I'll verbally highlight so that you know what to expect if you're not on the very latest version. Those of you on Java 11 are going to see many new things. I did not flag all of those individually, but a lot of people are on 21, so I wanted to show the differences there. This is not a puzzler's talk per se, although there are some puzzlers in it. It's meant to be things that you might encounter or want to know, or really that's new, I didn't know Java did that. So meet the monkey. This is most definitively not Curious George, because Curious George is copyright, and I would never use a copyright image. But it's a cute little monkey, and he's going to learn about things that are in the Java language that you might want to know. So we're going to start out with scope values. Raise your hand if you've heard of scope values. Scope values are meant to be a replacement for thread local. Thread local, where you have something that you want to be available and you want it to be immutable, and ideally you want it to be available with a certain space and not your entire program, which was the problem with thread local. So the idea is that you create a scoped value. It's generic, so it can be a scope value of, whatever. On a related note for anyone taking pictures, this entire presentation is on speaker deck, so you don't have to take pictures of all the slides. So you have a scope value, and it's generic. You put whatever you want in it. And then to use it, you create your thing, in my case, a list, and you call scope value.where, and you pass in your scope value. You've now created a binding, and then within the Lambda, your scope value is available to you. And in theory, your scope value is immutable. For those of you who've been around for a while, you remember the interview question of you have this immutable object, but it takes a list of strings and it's not really immutable? It's the same problem, except now it's with scope values. So your scope value is only immutable if you pass it something that is immutable, right? Since I didn't make a copy of my array list or make it immutable or use something that was immutable like list.of, I do not actually have an immutable array, and I can do whatever I want to it, which was not really what I was going for. I could have just passed in the list directly if I wanted the user to be able to fiddle with it. So that's not so great. Here I have a string, which is a little more in the spirit of, sorry, plant. I have a string which is in the, more of the spirit of an immutable value, because strings are immutable. So here I'm passing it in, and I call scope.get, and I get my actual immutable value, which I can't tamper with because it's a string. So what's going on here? Scope value only provides a getter, right? That's saying to you that it should be immutable. But if the underlying value is mutable, alas, you do not have something immutable. So be aware with scope value, on the lookout for future interview questions, because that one is totally getting rewritten to use modern Java. And as a bonus, records are the same deal. A record is immutable unless you pass in something to your record that is mutable, in which case, guess what? You now have a mutable record, kind of fun. Our next feature in Java 21 is being able to import modules. The idea here is when you open a Java file, the imports go on forever. Right? And we can use wildcards, but they still go on forever. If you're using Spring, you've got, what, 12 to 20 package names up there? And the idea of a module import is that you can get all of the imports for the entire module. So here I'm doing old school database stuff. I'm importing the module JavaSQL. I get everything that comes in JavaSQL without having to do anything else. This is great. I can use prepared statements and connections and result sets and anything I want, and I've got a one-line import. And it's pretty obvious what's going on here because I wrote what I was importing and you can tell what's going on. And this code is fine because date is found in javasql.date. We don't use it there anymore, but it's there, I promise. And this prints out javasql date and all is good. But I don't want javasql date because I'm writing code that isn't using that. I want java util date, which I also shouldn't be using. I should be using local date. But in this case, I've got some old code and it's using java util date and I need to preserve that API. So no problem. I import java util and I get what I want. It prints out java util date. Now wait a minute. We just said that module import gives me everything from JavaSQL, and now I'm using java util date. How does it know the difference, right? How does it know which one I want? Well, it knows which one I want because Java is very big on backward compatibility, right? We all know that. You use a feature and it's like, well, it works that way because this came first and this came second and this came third and they all needed to be backward compatible. This is. So what's going on here is module imports are new. So they essentially have a lower precedence than old school imports and you get what you ask for. If I want JavaSQL date in this scenario, I can still get it. I can import JavaSQL date explicitly in addition to the module import, and now my code is back to JavaSQL date. Cool. So the idea is explicit imports win over wildcards and both win over module imports. And if you import the same thing by name in two different ways, you still can't do it. That hasn't changed. Our next section is the home of future gotchas. These are things in Java 25 that aren't gotchas per se, but may be surprising to you if you're working on them. So I wanted to highlight them because it's nice to be surprised here and not when you're using them. When I gave this presentation in Boston, one of the audience members said something was cool while I was giving a presentation. So that was nice. I'll highlight that one. All you need in a file to run it is this. You don't need a class. You don't need an explicit long main method with a signature that goes on forever. I like this a lot because I volunteer in a high school and we're always teaching kids that are new to Java. So what goes on is, okay, we're going to write a really basic program. It's going to do a tiny bit of math. First, you type public static void. What's that? Don't worry about it. We'll learn it later. Okay, but what does it do? Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later. But this is so much better. There's no questions looking at this about what does it do. It's like, oh, main is the entry point. IO print line print stuff. I printed out intro. Makes sense. And you could, because you can use this with single source code execution, you create it in a file named whatever you want, .java, and you run it as Java, whatever you want, .java, so you don't have to compile, you don't have to have a class, you don't have to have names. You can, of course, have all of those things, but the nice thing is that, one, you can introduce them later, so you're not having a discussion what all these things do on day one. And the other one that's nice is your prototyping stuff. Right, when I'm prototyping something, I want to run it rapidly. And sometimes I don't want a REPL, I want an actual file. I like not having to type so much stuff. Right, I have so many files on my machine that were like vi, Jeanne.java, public static, blah, 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 blah. Right, and then I forget about them and they're still there. That's so much less to code. The other reason I use this a lot is I'll be testing something with different versions of Java, so I want to be able to run it in different versions quickly, and the REPL isn't as good for that. Next up, we have flexible constructors. I put this up in Boston, and an audience member immediately goes, "You can put shit before the constructor." I think that is a great explanation of this slide. It is now a part of the slide. So credit to the guy in Boston. But as you can see here, you can in fact put stuff before the constructor. Super is the third line of my constructor. You have to be careful what you put there. You can't reference things that don't exist yet. You can't reference things in the super class unless you're really careful about it. But for most things you can. And that's nice because you don't have to go through conservations in order to make it work. I have some methods where I'm calling another constructor of the super class and I'm passing in a bunch of long-winded methods because I can't put it before. It would be great to be able to have that in the method and have my code actually be more readable. So I'm excited about this feature. It's not a gotcha per se, although you can make it one without trying terribly hard. But for the straightforward case, it does what you would expect it to, and that's a good thing. So this outputs prologue, epilogue, and that is what the Java spec uses to refer to the parts of your constructor before and after super or this, so that we have vocabulary now. Because as nice as you can put shit before the constructor is as a description, I can't really say that at work when I'm describing how things work. So prologue is a much better term to describe what's going on in a way that doesn't get me called into HR to discuss why I'm talking about Java. Now let's go back to some things that aren't brand new, but are still newer. So we're going to start with a switch statement. And the monkey's really excited because the monkey knows all the gotchas with switch. They've been around a long time, no problem. So we all know what's wrong with this. Can someone shout out what's missing here? Yep, break. That is not new. That's been a thing since the dawn of time. But okay, fine. So if you're eating some things, you need a spoon. If you're not, some things you have your hands. But I'm eating soup with my hands and a spoon, and this just didn't go well. All right, cool. So we know how we're supposed to fix that. We're supposed to use a break. Another thing that's interesting is if you put case null in a traditional switch statement, it will fail with a compiler error telling you you can't do that. Null is in the spec, not a final constant, not allowed. All right, that's not new either. And I see some people nodding like, why are you telling me this? I'm telling you this because not everyone knows that, and it's going to be relevant on one of the next few slides. Now we have our new modern switch expression. I still don't have a break, but I don't need any more because I have the arrow operator where I'm just assigning each of these cases and putting it in the value. So if it's null, I put unknown type in tool. If it's clam chowder, I put get a spoon in tool, etc. Here, null is perfectly okay because I'm using a switch expression. Technically, I'm using a switch expression with pattern matching, which is why null is okay. Wouldn't know it because there's no pattern matching that appears here, but it's happening behind the scenes, and that's good. So traditional switch needs the break for fall through. No null because it's not a null compile time constant, but if you're using pattern matching, which as I said I am, it is allowed. Great. Now we know how switch works. There will be no further surprises in this section, right? They've all seen me talk before. Nobody thinks there's no surprises coming. All right, so we've got a switch expression here. And we have null, cloud, clam chowder, and pizza. And this gives us a compiler error because it doesn't cover all the scenarios. I'm assigning the result to your tool. It has to be defined, right? I'm using it, I'm storing it in a variable. I can't just be like, well, sometimes it's defined, sometimes it's not. Java doesn't work like that, right? So since I'm assigning it to something, it has to have default. Okay, no problem. I can also do case object O. That is pattern matching, the one that we were implicitly using before. Now it's a little more explicit. And that's saying match anything, right? Because it has to be something. So great, I get unknown type again, wonderful. So now I'm all proud of myself. I have these two techniques, and I learned that in Java 25, I can use an underscore for the variable name. If I don't want to reference it, I can show that, wonderful. And I also use default because I have two tools, I'm gonna use them, and no, it doesn't compile anymore. Well, you know why it doesn't compile? Because I have unreachable code. I can't get to default because everything matches object. So I have to choose between them. Either one is valid. I prefer default because it's a little more obvious why I'm doing this, right? I want to match everything. But because they both match the same set of stuff, you have to choose one. You can't just be like, oh, well, I want it to match. So default and object O do handle the fall through. They catch all the cases, but you have to choose. You can't have both. But wait, there's more. We're not done with switch expressions. We've got an enum here. We've got the 4 seasons. Great. We're in New York. There are 4 seasons. In California, there's more. They've got a drought season and a fire season, but we're in New York City. We only have 4 seasons. I've got my enum here, and I have that I am trying to match all 4 values, and I do. I have all 4 seasons here. I'm demonstrating that you can type the enum type, season dot or not. That's legal now. I like that because one of them is shorter. And I'm also demonstrating you can use a comma to match multiple in the same switch expression case. This is very good. This does exactly what I want. Also worth noting is enums and statics have been allowed in methods since Java 21. Don't usually want to do it, although sometimes with records it's useful because you can have essentially your own name tuple. The enum name is optional and it's exhausted because it's an enum. Excellent. I have another enum here, which does not appear to be exhaustive, right? I only have 2 of the cases, not 4. So you would think this didn't compile because we've been discussing at length here about how if you don't match all the values in the switch expression, it doesn't compile. But it does. The reason it compiles is the switch expression is not used for anything. It's not stored in a variable, it's not passed to a method. So therefore, it does not need to be exhaustive because we're not assigning it, so we don't have to cover all the cases. Okay. So switch expressions and assignments don't always need to go together. The underscore was added in Java 22, which is not 25, but it is after 21. So I'm claiming credit for Frank's "you should present about Java 25" thing on that slide. All right, so now we have null. We have here, we're matching clownfish, case null, or default. And this was one we encountered from our book. This example is not quite in the book, but it came from the book. We're looking at this and we're like, this won't work because case null should be first, and right, this is going to give us an error. It does not give us an error. So then Scott and I are sitting there like, wait, why? And we figured it out. It's because it's pattern matching. It knows clownfish isn't null, so it's totally okay with case null being later on. Should never write code like this, but it's really interesting that that is legal Java. Next up, we had another one, which was also interesting. We have this case clownfish and case null. Here we are assigning it to something, which is the method parameter system out print line. So I would expect this to not compile because we didn't handle all the possible outputs, and it doesn't compile. Wonderful. Next up, we have our traditional switch. We remembered the breaks this time. Same thing, case clownfish, case null, default. I remember that you weren't allowed to have case null in a traditional switch statement, and yet this compiles. That's interesting. So we're puzzling over this one some more, and then we're like, all right, well, let's play with it and see what goes on. And then something really interesting happened. We removed the default case from this. So same code, no default case, shouldn't matter. It's a traditional switch statement. We're assigning a value. And we got a compiler error that it doesn't cover all the possible inputs. Like, what now? Okay. As far as we can tell, and we're not 100% sure, we think that using the null is what's making it pattern matching, and therefore the new rules are applying, even though it looks like a traditional switch statement. Because in old Java, you couldn't have that case. But we're not 100% sure, because it seems a little odd that that would work. Say it again?
Because there's no backward compatibility in this case, so you.
Yeah, I agree there's no backward compatibility, but it seems odd the behavior would change in a traditional switch, and yet it does. So that was definitely an interesting puzzler, and it was not when we were looking for a puzzler. We were trying to get the code to work, and it was like, why is this not behaving the same way? So I wrote it down and made sure to put it in the talk when I got to unexpected behavior, because here, totally on topic. But wait, there's more. We're still not done with switch. Switch is going to be great. Okay, so we've got the order here. This, as you might expect, is no good. You can't put a default before another case. We've got the underscore from Java 22 again. And this fails for the same reason as catch, right? You can't catch exception and then underneath it catch IO exception. That's backwards. One of them is going to dominate the other. And in this case, default dominates, so you can't have anything after it. Great, totally makes sense. In a traditional switch, this is just fine. Again, backward compatibility, you've been allowed to do this forever. It's not a problem here, though, because we've got the fall-through thing, right? If I didn't have a break, it would be hitting all of them anyway. So that's okay. So the takeaway here is valid, and logical, which is that if you're doing pattern matching, the order matters, and the old style switch is super backward compatible, except for when it's not. Sound good? I think that's the takeaway. On a more serious note, make sure you never write code where any of those scenarios matter, because then you won't have this problem at your actual job. Okay. Next up, we have a classic, although there's a twist to it coming. So if you're removing code in a loop, we all know that you shouldn't do this. I've got an array list with 4 values, red alliance, blue alliance. I go through the list, I try to remove the value, I get a concurrent modification exception. This isn't new. The concurrent modification is because the iterator knows where it's up to, you're changing the value, and it's like, what's this? Don't do that. Right? And we know you don't do that. That's okay. But where it gets interesting is now I only have 2 elements in my loop, and this is just fine, sort of. It doesn't blow up, so that's something, I suppose, but it also doesn't do what I want. And the reason this happens is because there's less elements in the list. So let's look at this list. We start out with 2 elements in the list. The first time it goes through, it says, all right, I'm looking at the first value. The first value is red. You said you wanted me to remove the value because we're removing all the values. No problem. I've removed red. Now the list is alliance, and I am up to the second element in the list, and there are no elements left in the list, so I am done. Right? Whereas when you have it with the 4, the size is 3 after removal, it tries to go to the next one, and it's like, wait, you moved. Right? No more. I don't know what to do with this. Not done. Failure. Neither of them, of course, do what you want, and both of them are silly because you shouldn't write code that looks like that. Similarly here, I have the correct version. I have a copy on write array list, which does allow concurrency. So here I do, in fact, get my empty array. But what makes this thing silly is you could replace this entire mess of code with list.clear. Or if you really, really, really want to write unnecessary code, you can do remove if and a lambda, have your code be a little longer, because the person who wrote that first line of code was probably measured by the complexity of what they're writing or something of that sort. And all right, fine. You want complicated code? Here's code. It's overly complicated. It uses lambdas. It uses a remove if. No one would write it that way. It's unique. Wonderful. But seriously, list.clear if you want to clear a list. Okay. Next up is creating a set. So I've got a set here with all the words in the world. And I want a set, but I would like to create it without having to loop through it. So I use arrays as list words, put it in a hash set, and I get my list. And it does exactly what I want. I now have a set. I've been able to do this, pretty much forever. Maybe not from Java 1, but pretty long time. All right, now I'm looking at my IDE, and my IDE is like, I don't know what's with that middle code here. It looks like it was written in Java 5. You can do better than that. All right, great. So I change it to set.of because set.of is newer, and I have 1 line, and I don't have all of that stuff, and it blows up. And it blows up because set.of says in the Java doc that all of the arguments you pass it have to be unique, and they're not here. Whereas when I was doing it with the constructor, it did not have that rule. Okay, so now I know I have to be careful. Set.of does take var args. They can't be duplicates, and I should read the documentation. Excellent. I see no reason to remember that learning for the next slide, so I'm going to go back to not reading the documentation because my IDE knows everything. I learned this before AI was common, but I'm pretty sure I would have the same problem with AI because AI would suggest to do the same refactoring. All right, so I have some code. I wrote it in Java 8. It's not quite as old as the other code. Using collect.collectors.toList. This does exactly what I want it to. It converts the result into a sorted list, and I am good. So I open up my IDE one day. This did happen to me, and the IDE has a nice little yellow line under collect.collectors.toList and says that I should change the code to use toList because that's more concise and easier to read, and I don't have all of this drama that goes with it. Cool. So I do that, and my code blows up. I'm glad I had good unit tests. I got an unsupported operation exception. I did look in the Java doc because I learned something from my whole set story over there. And the Java doc says that toList is immutable. Cool. My code did not think the list was immutable. It tried to mutate the list, and now, poof, it is no good. So collector toList returns immutable list, and toList returns an immutable list, which means they are not actually the same thing. And the AI or the IDE's advice to refactor it was not so well-founded. It's usually right, but it's not always right, and you can't just take it blindly, change the code, commit, and hope for the best. Next up, we have a back collection. This one some of you have seen before. We have a map here. We've got Boston and New York City, and they're playing each other. When I did this in Boston, I didn't have the rivalry right, so they told me my example is wrong, and I'm sitting here looking at the code like I know what you're talking about. And they're like, you don't even know about the rivalry? Like, I know it exists. I probably should have searched for it before I produced the example, but that's how you anger a Boston fan, that not only are you not involved in the rivalry, you don't even know the team that they're supposed to be enemies with. All right, but fine. This works. It's a back collection, right? So I change the key, it changes the map behind the scenes, and everything is fine. Same here, I've got my collection, and that is a back collection, changes the original map, nothing interesting or surprising there. Next up, we've got var. Var is great for surprising behavior. You should only use it when you are guaranteed to not have surprising behavior, right? For example, path equal paths.of, great place to use var. Another great place to use var, when you're using an intermediate variable that you're immediately passing somewhere else, or you need to have a variable type so you can use an annotation and you don't care what it is. Bad place to use it, where you can have surprises, aka this section. All right, so we've got here a nice hash set. We're gonna store the minimum value of 5 and 3 in it, and we're gonna store the number 3 in it, and we're gonna print the numbers, and we get 3. This is wonderful. This is what you want to happen, right? Sets give us unique values. I have one number 3. This is perfect. Okay. So next up, I am going to repeat this, except instead of passing the number 3, I'm going to have math round 3.14. Okay. Right, 314 pi rounds down to 3. So I still have the number 3 twice, so I output the results, and there's 2 3s in my set. Does anyone know why there's 2 3s in my set? There you go. That is correct. So var nums equal new hash set. I did not actually define my type anywhere, which means my type is object. So it is happy to put both types in there. Min returns an int, so I have an integer of 3. Round returns a long, so I have a long of 3. And since I didn't specify my type, they are completely different values, and I have 2 3s in my set. And of course, since I outputted it with 2 string, it's like, yeah, this is fine. You've got 2 3s, all is good. Right, different types, not what I wanted. If I had used the type instead of using var, or if I had used var and not used the diamond operator and specified a type, I would have gotten a nice compiler error, which would have been a far better clue as to what was going on than why are there 2 3s, sets are supposed to be unique. Next up, we have var and inference. So here I have 2 lists of integers. One is empty, one has the values 1, 2, and 3 in it. And I'm doing some work with them, and I get what I want, the output of 2, 3, 4. This code works. Yay! So nice when that happens. Next up, I change x2 to use var because I've heard good things about var, and I've heard that when I'm using them with lists, it's super straightforward. So I do this, I get the same output. This is good. Now I'm going to change x1 to use a var, and my code no longer compiles. The reason my code no longer compiles is because list.of is not the same type as list of integer. Unfortunately, my error message could be a little clearer. It's telling me that I can't use the operator plus because we're now dealing with objects and not ints. And then it talks about a capture, so I have to remember what's going on there in order to figure out what's wrong. But ultimately, the problem was I didn't specify the type, so that I didn't get the type I wanted, and therefore I don't have what I want, and then this is the capture that it's going on about in the output and why you can't do it. Okay, so now I'm going to sort characters. We've still got some problems with var and stream in case you're wondering, but I'm going to have some nice code here, and I'm going to try to sort my string. Okay, so I've got my stream of the 3 values. I'm grouping by the letters, and I am getting the first character, and I get exactly what I want here, the number with that length. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to change this because this code is a little wordy, and comparator RC equal comparator natural order isn't particularly buying me much. So I could just inline that bit of code, and then I would have less going on the screen. Not really a fan of that because that last line is kind of long and I'm making it longer, but all right, no problem, I'll give it a shot. So I get an error message that it can't find a suitable method. And the reason it can't find a suitable method is it no longer knows what the type of comparator natural order is, which means, spoiler, it's not string. But of course, that was not the entirety of the message. This was the entirety of the message. And it's great when you change a simple bit of code and that happens because because you're looking at that and it's like, really? It does all that? Huh. Okay, there's method there. I got that there's no suitable method, and I get that there's a lot of stuff on the screen. But you puzzle through that and you realize what you did. But wait, that wasn't the only message. There was also another message because I needed a second message. This message I like better. I wish this one came up first because this is telling me what's going on. I thought I had a string, but I don't. I have an object and I can't call a string method. This message told me what I needed to do. That first message was very long. Right, and what's going on here is that char and character are not the same thing. The inferred type fails and it propagates the error to that other call of the lengthy gibberish thing. But it does suggest a nice workaround that I can use. I am able to write this code where I explicitly tell collectors mapping that I'm dealing with a string, and then it does know what the type is. But now we're back to the land of ugly, and the whole reason for inlining this code was to have less code, and now I have more code, which was not really what I was going for when I wrote that. Next up, we have overloading. All right, this is an example that's fairly familiar to folks. We have a method that takes a number, a method that takes an integer, a delegator method, and the number 42, because that's the method number you should use for everything. And this outputs integer and number. It outputs integer first. We call target.check with our integer. It calls it, all is good. Then it calls target delegator with the integer, but the integer is really a number, so it calls the method check with number, and we get number as a result. Okay, I learn this every single time I take the certification exam while I'm reviewing for it, but I know it works this way. I just have to remind myself that it's a thing. Fine. So now I'm changing my code, and this time I'm storing integer value of in number. And this time I get number for both because number is the type. So it calls check number, delegator number, and I have a number. Okay. But I've heard things about var, and by now someone should have told me to stop using var for these obscure things, but that wouldn't be fun, now would it? So now my type is var, and we're back to the original output because var gives you what the thing actually is, and integer.42 value of 42 is in fact an int, so I get the same value as if I hadn't had an integer there. It's a reminder that the method is chosen at compile time, not runtime. Since var uses integer, it's the same as when we started, except it's a little more confusing. Next up, we have equals. This is one you've seen before as well. You've got my two values here that are 8. It prints true because 8 is cached. And then the same example with 8,000, it prints false for the first one because 8,000 is big and not cached. Not a surprise, but I included it here for anyone who is new to Java, might not be aware. Next one came from my friend Elena. She's encountered this in the wild. I've encountered it by poking at it. URL equality is fun. So you create a URL variable, and you give it your domain name, and then you ask if they're equal, and of course they are, right? Google is stable. If it changed its IP address or DNS alias every 8 seconds, you would not be very happy with things. So that's fine. But then at work, you might not have Google. You might have a cloud URL. And these are not guaranteed to be the same. Should be the same, but it might not be because if the DNS resolution changes while your program is running, they're 2 different values. And you wouldn't expect that because you passed in the same string. So you would think it would be comparing that string and not what it ultimately resolves to. And I thought that was really interesting. So it turns out that URL equals method calls the string handlers equals method, and that uses DNS resolution, which brings you to the second problem of you probably weren't expecting that call to go and resolve the thing in the first place. Right? So now you have a potential performance problem that you thought you were creating a variable that you were just going to reference, and poof, it's going off and doing things. So cloud URLs change often, especially when you're doing development, so you really should be using URI that doesn't have any of these problems. Shout out to the website that explains this super well. But since that one came from somebody else, the next one is mine. I do a lot of reporting at my job on various data. And a lot of times at the end of the year, my manager will ask me for various reports on things that happened at the beginning of the year. And I love those because it's a nice small coding thing. It's never the same report, so you get to write a little code from scratch each time, and it's easy and it's throwaway and it's great end of the year. All right, so we're going to start with a little bit of reporting code. Christmas Eve, we're going to pretend it's a few months from now, but we're going to get to Christmas. It'll be there soon. And I ask it for the week field and the week number and a little more data here, and it tells me that Christmas Eve is in the last week of the year, right? Which is true. Christmas Eve is a week before New Year's Eve, which is the last day of the year. And that works the way I would expect. So I'm doing a bunch of reporting. Then I start changing the code. And this time I am going to ask it for a little more information. And I'm going to output the week number, which is the week of the week-based year. And I'm going to output the week, which is the week of the year. And this time I get 1 and 53. Like, well, it's not 1 because it's still this year. And my boss isn't really thrilled with this 53rd week of the year thing because he learned there were 52 weeks of the year. So I'm looking at this and I'm wondering what's going on. And then I look at the Java doc and I figure out what's going on. So first is a fact. Most years are 52 weeks plus 1 day. That 1 day is really important. And like all good programmers and off by 1 errors, this 1 day is the cause of all this problem. So 2025 started on a Wednesday. That's true. You don't have to look it up. So the week-based week starts the Sunday before. That's in a different year. So that's how you get to 1. And then the week of the year returns a value between 1 and 54, right? So I'm thinking there's 52 weeks of the year. Now there's 54 weeks of the year. And they're doing that to guarantee that there's uniqueness across the year. But it's really like the partial week of the year, right? So if you start on a Wednesday, you have a 4-day week. And at the end of the year, you have another short week. And that's how you get these interesting APIs in your year. So not particularly what you're expecting to see, but a good surprise. Like, all right, fine. Now that I know this, I'm going to go about my day in code. I'm not going to call that API ever again in my entire life, and I won't have this problem, and I won't have to think about it ever again. All right, cool. So I'm going to use datetime formatter to get a pattern because I want to have dates in the output. That's helpful to people. What day of the week did the week start, or was it present day, and everything like that. So I'm going to start with Christmas Eve, and I'm going to format my date. And I didn't want to look at the Java doc to see whether I should use lowercase or uppercase because I figured I would just print them out and see what happens. We see how this is going. So it prints out the same value. Great. I'm suspicious. I don't believe that these things do the same thing. So I'm going to try another example. This time I'm going to ask about New Year's Eve. And for New Year's Eve, I get for the lowercase one the date I was expecting. That's the one you should use. And for the uppercase one, I got the future. I wonder how many users we're going to have next year. I don't know, but I can report on it. So the answer is lowercase. And yes, I could have checked the doc or used an IDE or used a search engine or used AI in order to find out the answer. But this was so much more fun because I got to get my code to output what's happening next year. Maybe I could have handed in the same report twice. That would save a lot of time. I feel like I would get caught, though. So we've got lowercase y is year, uppercase is week of year, and we all just saw what was going on with week of year. So unless you actually very specifically want that, it's not the thing to use. All right, closing resources. Resources can be closed with try with resources, which is auto-closable. So we've got a straightforward example here. I have a prepared statement. Maybe I used import module and the JavaSQL thing in order to get to it. And I use it in a try. I run the statement execute update, and everything here is fine. This does exactly what I want it to. Everything is good with the world. But prepared statements aren't that useful if you're not using any parameters. Like, yeah, they cache values, but you want them to do more than that. So this time I'm going to pass in a prepared statement that sets a value. And now I've written myself a resource leak. Because if the code fails on statement.setString, it never calls my auto-closable, so it never closes the prepared statement, which is not quite what I had in mind. But resource leak, yay. All right, so all better. I've now put it in the try with resources, and it does what I expected it to. Excellent. Now we've got the same thing with I/O. Here I have a buffered reader and a fairly long-winded way of reading a file. We'll get back to that criticism shortly. But it does read the file. It goes through, it loops through all the files, and there's no leak here. But there's a lot of code here. And if you showed this to someone in a merge request, they'd be like, really? You know, when did you learn how to write code? Was it Java 1.4? Why is the code this long? It should be much shorter than that. You should use files.line, because files.line can count the lines of code or read the lines of code. So presumably this code was here to count the lines of code, and someone says, no problem, you can rewrite this file lines path.count, and now you have this all in one line. Alas, you have written another resource leak. Yay! Files.lines does not close your resource. It is also an auto-closable. So if you don't close the resource, nobody closes the resource, and we know where that leads. So the resource is not closed by a terminal operation because the terminal operation knows how to count things. It doesn't know that it has a file. And the stream doesn't close the resource because its job was to open the resource. So we're in a position where none of the code is responsible for closing the resource, and therefore it doesn't get done because he's doing it. So this affects a number of methods: find, lines, list, new directory, stream, and walk. And the solution to this is for you to use auto-closable and close the stream yourself. So this is the pattern. It's not quite one line, but it's pretty close to it, and all is good. Is that a question or a time? Okay, we're almost done. So great. Next up is ++. This one isn't a puzzler, but it's fun, and someone told it to me on the internet, so I threw it in the talk. This code is not legal. You can't use ++ twice. I wouldn't expect to, but you know, fun. But this code is legal. This outputs 12. Isn't that great? You can't do ++ twice, but you can totally do this. So we start out with our 5, then we get 5 + 7, then we get 12. Yay, party trick. And now Teams is 7 because we had 2 ++s in there. And with that, I finished on time. I know I talked a little fast, but I wanted to finish within the time I was given.
Thanks, Jeanne. Any questions? For module inputs, always said that you shouldn't use like star lines. Is it the same thing with module inputs?
Well, the problem with star is that it's controversial in the first place. Right? There are some people who feel star is evil, and there are some that think it's great. If you think it's evil, you're probably not going to like module imports very much because it's like star on steroids. I'm from the camp where I'm fine with star, so therefore I'm fine with module imports. But on a more serious note, it's what your team wants, right? If your team isn't comfortable with something, you shouldn't use it. But I don't find myself looking at the imports unless they're broken. Right? If I want to find something, I'm going to do Control-V and my IDE is going to go there. If I'm in Eclipse, I'm going to do F3 and my IDE is going to go there. My IDE has no problem with finding the code. Right? So unless I'm in a situation where I'm looking at the imports, I don't really care what they say and why have them be longer. And it also avoids the situation of the unused imports thing, and now you have the warnings and you have to organize imports to get rid of the imports you aren't using. It's like, why? But you know, your mileage may vary. This is definitely a religion thing.
We have this kind of like a shorthand when we do import. We can have it like a shorter version. Do we have something in Java common, or we still have just like import module and we need to put the full thing, and after that just
Yeah, now it's
just
import module and the name of the module.
So there's no like Kotlin style like ls or package or module.
No. But Kotlin's a JVM language, so
Yeah.
just use it. But no, core Java did not copy that.
About list of, we can specify list of, for example, we just get a diamond to provide type. It will be works fine.
Agreed.
As someone who's new to writing Java code, would you advise to just stay away from Switch and just stick with it else?
No, Switch is fine. I would advise from doing clever things with Switch. That's how you get yourself into this situation. If you use Switch for its intended purposes, either, you know, here's my cases and I want to match one of them, or here's my pattern matching, I want to match one of these types with these conditions, it's fine. It's when you start doing things of any complexity that's a problem. So the answer is don't do that. And pretty much this entire talk is an exercise on don't do that. But it's important to see what not to do so that you don't waste time doing it.
On one of the first slides, you said something changed about enums and static methods.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
In the past, you weren't allowed to put a static value, and enums or enum and record classes are statics. You couldn't put it inside of a method. It was illegal. It didn't need to be, but it was illegal. And then as part of some of the more recent developments to Java, that became necessary, so it became legal in all cases. And you don't have a backward compatibility thing there because you know no one was doing it, it was illegal before. It's not that useful in practice with the exception of records. Being able to create a record, which is essentially a named tuple if you use it that way, is nice because now you're able to specify exactly what you want.
Okay, so thanks again, Jeanne. I also want to point out, so Jeanne is a co-author along with Scott, the study guides for certification for Java.
Yes.
So that
And with Victor, a member of this group of real world Java.
Right. A couple under your belt. Barry leads us all.
Yes, Barry wins.
Like 15 books. It's like it's insane.
So we have prizes
So
for
we have-
IntelliJ and the big prize, right?
The AirPods, is that the
Yeah.
AirPods.
Can we do IntelliJ first because
Yes,
fast?
certainly. We have what, 3 or 4?
3.
Right, Rodrigo? We have 3 licenses to raffle. Okay.
Okay, so first is raise your hand if you don't have an IntelliJ license and you want one.
Thank you for raising.
Okay, we're doing a raffle.
Yeah, I know, Mike.
Keep your hands up. I'm going to point to you, say a number in order. It's a lot. We don't have that many. Okay, one.
But how many do not have IntelliJ licenses?
And one.
Show those hands.
Raise your hand. Raise your hand.
Show those
1,
hands.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We don't have 11.
No.
Okay, so 4.
We like 6 to do that. All right.
Are you confident about that? Okay, so we're going to do 6. Raise your hands again. Remember your number when I point at you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, we're going to draw 6 numbers. When I call on you, say your name. So we're going to remember who won, and then email us at info@javasig, and we will send you an IntelliJ license. Yeah, this is the most people we've ever had that haven't had an IntelliJ license in ages. All right, random number generator is ready, 1 through 11. Our first winner is 2.
Yay, 2.
Say your name. Jonathan. Our next winner is 1. Say your name.
Okay.
Naeem. 6.
Hey, okay, we have a winner.
Okay. 7.
Okay.
2 again. We did that one already. 3. Okay. How many did I do so far? Okay, one more.
One more.
10.
Yay.
Yay! What's your name? Okay.
So-
So everyone who won, email us at info@javasig.com, and we will send you an IntelliJ license.
That's it.
All right, Gabrielle, and I have one more prize handout for you. Can we put on?
That was unnecessary.
All right, I'm slipping a Terra Sky t-shirt in just to sweeten the pie. Those of you who shared your emails with us,
We're still recording, actually.
thank you. Those of you who just shared your emails with us, we will be respectful of them. Thank you. Your names are in this hat, and let's see. Can you hold this for me? Right here? Yes. Thank you. All right. Old school. Our lucky winner is Tyler Deans. Tyler Deans. Well done. Consolation prize, everyone. Grab a cookie on the way out. I don't want to pack those up. And thank you very much for joining us here. And for
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
right.
It's good. It's good luck.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks to Terra Sky. Thank you all very much.